My name is Jaime Sant Flores. Over the past month, I spent countless of hours documenting, recording, and analyzing stories passed down from generation to generation within my family. I've compiled a visual and audible account of stories which I now have the pleasure of sharing with you. I hope you enjoy my family's story as much as I have. Thank you for watching. Spain turned into a republic in 1931, when the Republican parties won the elections in the most important cities. The ages of monarchy ended. Many people expected lots from the Republic. Mostly they expected social rights, a reform on the farmers' industry, and modernization. The left-wing parties radicalized since they wanted to accelerate all these reforms in the country. On the other side, the most right-wing people feared radical changes, mostly in the army. All this led to violent incidents in towns and cities and even in rural areas. In 1936, a left-wing coalition known as El Frente Popular won the elections and the violence over the country augmented. The coup that General Mola was planning for months breaks out the 17th of July of 1936 on Melilla. The 18th of July, General Franco joined the coup on Canarias. After that, he flies to Tetuan to take the lead of the monarchy forces. The first city to take over by the rebels in the peninsula was Sevilla. Then all the cities in Andalusia kept being taken over one after the other. When the news arrived to Madrid of how the coup was successful in the southern cities, the unions encouraged the government to distribute weapons. In Barcelona, the anarchists and communist groups were prepared for the possible coup, and so they went out to the streets with armed forces. The rebels were beaten. In Madrid, many armed workers assaulted the mountain of the barracks, where the rebel militia was staying. After fighting for hours, the rebels were overthrown out of the barracks. In Pamplona, General Mola was successful in the revolt thanks to the help of the Carlistas, a fascist group formed by Primo de Rivera in 1931. The main cities in Castilla also fell. The plane that was supposed to take General Sanjurjo crashed. The rebels lost their leader. 3 days after the coup, the rebels only controlled a portion of the country, which made the rebellion a failure. This means the rebels could only achieve victory after a long-lasting war. The civil war has started. The first story takes place in Malaga, when Baltasar Peña Hinojosa was there while the coup broke out all over Spain.
I remember that date, the 7th of July of 1936. My good friend Felix Asiego called me over 4 p.m. telling me I should get home early. At 5, I left work and headed to my house. I could feel the fear in the streets. The people were running to their homes and there was some traffic in the city center. Before getting into the street where my house was, I decided to go up to La Alameda with the car in search of the Church of Santo Domingo, where my countryside house was, to see the atmosphere over there. When I got there, I could see a big crowd of people covering the whole street. I got scared, so I turned away and went straight home. By the park next to my house, I could hear some isolated shots. I saw a bunch of armed police officers passing near me with their heads down. That night, my mother-in-law slept home since my wife was suffering from puerperal fever. Like if the sickness was all our problems, we barely talked about what was going on outside. 3 in the morning, I received a call. It was Carlos Arias, hearing prosecutor and a good friend of mine. He was in jail when all this happened, taking statements. He told me to get my wife and daughters out of the house. Apparently, the military movement had failed and the multitude were going to burn our neighborhood. I told him I couldn't do that because of my wife's fever. I couldn't carry her like that, walking anywhere. At 6 in the morning, Carlos appeared in my house with a taxi and two guards to pick us up. He insisted to take my wife and my two daughters to a hotel where he was staying. He told me in one moment or another they were going to assault the wealthy people, recover my two daughters and my wife with my coat, and they left in a taxi. I went walking to the hotel. On the way there, they stopped my family, but Carlos had the idea of saying that this was the family of the British consul, which helped to let them go. A few minutes later, I left my family. I saw a dozen hooligans, mostly young kids, looting the house of Perez Asensio. They were taking furniture and curtain out of it. Next to that house was my father-in-law's house, covered by a long fence with poorly barbed wire. My mother-in-law had the precaution of locking the fence earlier this morning. One of the kids was trying to climb it. That didn't work on the first try. At that moment, I saw an old man come and see the house and saw how on the balcony there was a sign that said Vice Consul Library. He then indicated to the kids to keep going, as it's a consul home and there's tons of other houses to assault. They continued their way to the Espurua family, a big house with a huge garden, which they assaulted, breaking everything and burning all that was inside the house. When I was walking near a neighborhood known as Love Parade because of the many married couples that live there, an intense gunfire started. I had to take refuge in Concha's house, a good friend of my family. There, I stayed for 3 hours, avoiding danger and seeing cars and trucks with armed people pass. The hours passed, and my fear to keep walking didn't go away. Finally, Concha's brother came with me through the stairs in the backyard. We avoided going through the park where they heard shootings. I made him go back to his house. I didn't want him to suffer any unnecessary risk. Some minutes after I left him, I saw a truck full of armed militia pass through me. I had to find refuge in the first house I saw, a house of Jesus. I talked with about an hour. I didn't want to leave that nice family, which advised me to change my clothes since they thought I could get in trouble for being dressed fancy like a gentleman. Who would know that a walk on a normal day would take me 20 minutes would take 12 long hours. Me reaching the hotel and seeing my friends and family again produced a lot of tranquility, which would be disturbed by the hard moments we would have to face a few days later. I was scared of staying in that hotel since it was going to be one of the most visited places during the war. One of our family friends, Salvador Alvarez, was murdered in front of the gas station by the anarchists. He was arrested on the backyard of the hotel my family and I was staying. When they took him, they claimed it was just going to be a short interrogation.
After this, Hotel Vasconia became infested with people since many people went there seeking for a safe place to be at. The place became out of control. Baltasar's wife and his two daughters were taken out of there to Sevilla, where they stayed the rest of the war. Baltasar, on the other hand, was taken to the customs in Malaga. The place was overcrowded, which made it able for him to escape. After that, he stayed at the Bolivian consul. During the war, consuls were treated as national territories, so during the war they weren't assaulted in any moment. He managed to stay there thanks to his brother-in-law, who worked there and didn't leave until the war was over, in Malaga. The second story is about Carola Gros, Baltasar's mother-in-law. As you can see on this photo taken right after the war, Carola is the old woman, in the middle, sitting down. On the left, you can see a baby who is being held by Carola's daughter. That baby is my grandmother, Cristina. Carola was in Hotel Vasconia with her daughter and nieces. The chaos that was breaking the hotel, people being killed, arrested or kidnapped. It was the worst place to be in the whole city. Her brother-in-law helped with this as he was safe in Gibraltar. He paid 10,000 pesetas to the local police for them to leave the hotel through a safe passage and get to Gibraltar. Getting to Gibraltar was the only way for Carola to maintain her family's safety. So the happiness of being with her whole family and the relief she felt once she got there couldn't be described. But then Carola's three sons, Antonio, Eduardo, and Carlos, were imprisoned by an anarchist group. She paid for them to be free, but they never got to Gibraltar on time. So the concern in the family started. Carola met with her husband, brother and sister in Gibraltar, where she left to go to Sevilla, as she had family members, and seemed like a more safety place for her family. Carola was the center of the two families. She's the one who was always concerned for everyone's health, and the one who would write 5 different notes every day, even though she didn't receive any. She would pray for the family every day. By this time, the only way for family members to communicate with each other during the war was via notes. Now, most of these notes were delayed, so the information was received late. And this is what happened to Carola with her sons. This note written by Eugenio Gros, Carola's brother, to her sister talks about the preoccupation they have about their sons. For the ones that I fear are for Antonio, Eduardo, and Carlos. In September 1956, Carola found out about the death of the 3 sons. She couldn't believe this. The family didn't sleep for days.
Poor Carola, who, thank God, arrived last night, despite all the efforts made. Aunt Lucilda's claim and recommendations to the consulate. She had to pay 10,000 pesetas to be able to leave. Poor little Carola is coming, dead of being able to suffer from her. They have told her that they have hidden her 3 children in the field in some farmhouse, because now it is impossible for them to ship.
The 3 sons were told that they were going to be taken out of prison, to be sent on a boat, when instead they were sent to the field and murdered. This story takes place in a different place than the others. In a town of La Mancha, close to Ciudad Real. The whole state of Castilla-La Mancha was owned by Los Republicanos and was taken over by the Nationalists when the war ended. This family, my grandpa's family, lived most of their life in Villarrubia, so they were well known in the town. The only person out of town was my great-grandfather, Modesto. The name of the family was Villegas, my grandma Maria's family. Modesto and Maria had 3 sons, Pedro, who was 17 and studying in Madrid when the war broke out, Juan José, my grandfather, who was 14, and Ramon, who was 11. When the war broke up, the Nationalists didn't take over. Some extreme groups formed up called Grupos Revolucionarios. They would take people who weren't being considered loyal to the government, and they were formed by anarchists and communists. In that period of time, they went to find Modesto at his house in Villarrubia. He was sick that day, and so they grabbed him with his pajamas. He was sent into a local jail in the town. Other family members were also getting sent out. Some days after, Modesto's wife went to see how he was doing, but to her surprise, she was told not to come back. They took him down the road and executed him with no hesitation. Shortly, the same happened to Maria's brother. After the tragedy, the family stayed the rest of the war in their house, quarantined and isolated, because of how scared they were. Death loomed over the family. The death of Modesto changed the way the whole family viewed the war, especially for my grandfather. They didn't know what happened to the older brother, Pedro, who was in Madrid. They were worried that he would be endangered in Madrid. In the meanwhile, Maria was soon to discover what actually happened to her son. It was not until after the war when she found out about the tragedy. Pedro was staying with his cousin in a public house called a pension, which is like a small hotel for students. A group of anarchists kidnapped them from the pension to murder them in an area of Madrid named Fuencarral. The worst part was they didn't find the bodies, and they still haven't.